Harvest has started for many and is about to start for many more, and growers' focus will be on keeping combines moving and getting straw cleared from fields as soon as possible afterwards. However, there is another job that deserves some attention at this time, and that's preparing to sow cover crops. We know that the benefits of cover crops can often be modest, but we also know that maximising the amount of growth of the cover crop in the autumn-winter period gives you the best chance of getting a positive effect of cover crops in the succeeding crop. Why would we sow cover crops in the first place? Well, two of the main reasons we would sow cover crops, firstly, is to reduce nitrate leaching. And obviously, the earlier we can take up the nitrate in the autumn, the less likely it is to be lost as rainfall increases over the autumn-winter period. And also, the more growth we get, the more nitrate we're going to take up over that period. Another reason for sowing cover crops might be to increase organic matter levels in the soil. And obviously, the more organic matter we can plough back into the soil or cultivate back into the soil, the greater effect we're going to have on organic matter levels. Therefore, better growth of the cover crop is going to give us better effects on organic matter levels in the soil. How do we go about maximising cover crop growth? Well, one of the main levers we have is sowing date. Early sowing has a big effect on cover crop growth. And to demonstrate that, we set up a trial last year in Oak Park looking at different sowing dates of cover crops and the effect that had on the cover crop growth over the autumn-winter period. And I'll take you through some of the results that we found from that trial now. So in the trial we had 3 sowing dates. First was July 30th, which is quite early and really only possible after winter barley or winter oats. The second date was August 18th, so the middle of August. This is more of a target date after spring barley or perhaps winter wheat, particularly in the southern part of the country where harvest of those crops might be expected to be complete at that stage in a normal year. And then we had a later date of September the 8th, which is quite late for sowing cover crops, but it's what often happens under our conditions where we get a rain-delayed harvest or rain-delayed straw removal. At each of those 3 sowing dates, we had 2 cover crops. We had either mustard or hairy vetch. We didn't use any mixtures. We just used 2 straight cover crops, mustard or hairy vetch. Mustard being an example of a fairly fast-growing non-legume, and hairy vetch being a winter hardy legume. So we followed both these cover crops at the 3 different sowing dates right through the season, right out until we ploughed the crop in late February of 2021. So just to show the huge difference that sowing dates make on cover crop development, this is a picture taken on the 21st of September. And in the background, we can see the early sown mustard. It's already in flower at this stage, sown on July 30th. And in the foreground, we have the area where the late sown mustard was sown. So mustard sown on September 8th. So just almost 2 weeks before this picture was taken, and you can just see the huge difference in development between those dates, which are approximately 6 weeks apart. And this is a picture taken on October 9th, and in this picture we can see 3 sowing dates of mustard. In the foreground, nearest the camera, we have the later sowing date of September 8th. In the middle of the picture, we have mustard that was sown on the 18th of August, and in the background, we have mustard that was sown in July 30th. And you can just see the gradient of growth that exists there. So here we have a view of the trial on the 23rd of October, and we have the late sown vetch just going out of picture. And we have the later sown mustard, and you can see that even after 6 weeks, there is not a lot of growth on either of those. This is the mustard that was sown on the 18th of August, and you can see there's a good bit more growth on that particular plot, followed by the vetch sown on the 18th of August. Again, it's not as tall, but there's quite a bit of biomass there. And then we have the mustard that was sown on the 30th of July, and you can see quite advanced and quite a lot of biomass there, followed by the vetch sown on the 30th of July. So at about the time this video was taken of the trial, we took samples from the trial, and this is the mustard from the 3 different sowing dates on the floor in the lab. And you can see on the left hand side is the early sown mustard, in the middle is the mustard sown on the 18th of August, and on the right hand side we have the mustard sown on the 8th of September, and you can just see the large difference in the size of each of those piles. And just under the mustard, we can see the weeds that came out of each plot. And the main thing to look at here is the amount of weeds that was in the later sown cover crop on the 8th of September. It was almost half and half weeds and cover crop. So this is an aerial view of the trial taken on the 11th of December. And we'll just look at the mustard plots, which are the plots that are pointed out, and the 3 different sown dates. On the left we have July 30th, in the centre we have August 18th, and on the right hand side we have the mustard sown on September 8th. And you can see that the September 8th sowing date has quite little biomass in comparison to the other 2. But we took samples out of the trial at this stage, and we can look at the biomass figures that we measured from each of these plots at this stage. So this was the biomass measured on the plots on December 12th, and each of the bars includes both the cover crop, the sown cover crop, and any weeds that were present in the plot, so any green material that was on the plots at that date. And the main thing to note here is that the amount of biomass decreased in an almost linear fashion as sowing date was delayed. And if we just look at the mustard figures, we can see that we were losing about 2 tonnes per hectare for each 3-week delay in sowing date. So as we went from July 30 to August 18th, we went from approximately 4.5 tonnes per hectare down to 2.5 tonnes per hectare. And it was as we delayed from August 18th to September 8th, we went from 2.5 tonnes per hectare down to just over 0.5 of a tonne per hectare. So the previous graphs included both weeds and cover crop biomass added together, but we did also separate out the weeds from the cover crop, and we measured them separately to the cover crop. And in this graph we expressed the weeds as a percentage of the total biomass at each sowing date. And we can see for the July 30th sowing date there was very few weeds present. The cover crop was growing so vigorously there was very little chance for the weeds to get going. And also on the August 18th sowing date, there was relatively few weeds present. But if we look at the September 8th sowing date, between 40 and 60% of the total biomass was present as weeds. That was mainly because the cover crop wasn't able to get established as quickly as it did in the previous 2 sowing dates, and it allowed the weeds to get established at that sowing date. So I suppose the main conclusion we can draw from all of this is that early sowing is essential in order to get good growth of the actual sown cover crop in your field. And there can be dramatic reductions in biomass production even with relatively short delays in sowing date. But I suppose one of the issues associated with sowing cover crops early is that you do get a lot of biomass, and then having to get rid of all that biomass can be thought to be quite a challenge. And this is just an overview of the trial in late February, just before we ploughed the trial down. And I suppose the first thing you'll see is it's still green, so there was no perennial weeds, or there was no grass weeds in this particular trial, so we didn't apply any glyphosate, we just ploughed down directly. And I suppose the other thing you will notice is that if some of the plots are yellow, and that was the early sown mustard, which had died off naturally and was basically there was no green material left. And this is just a close-up of this type of material that we had left just before we ploughed. The 2 later sowing mustard crops were still green, whereas in the background we have the early sown mustard, which had died off completely as a result of natural senescence, and also we had some quite heavy frosts in early January. So as I said, in this particular trial we didn't apply any glyphosate, nor did we cut or chop the cover crops, and even though there was quite a bit of material left on the still standing, we got quite a good coverage, plough down of the material, and very little of it visible in the ploughed ground. Obviously, if you're in a minimum tillage situation, you wouldn't be able to do that, but as we were in a plough-based system, we decided that we wouldn't apply any glyphosate or chop the material. So there you can see just how important early sowing is, and the difference just a few weeks can make. Delaying your sowing date from the middle of August to early September can have a very dramatic effect on cover crop growth, and therefore every effort should be made to try and get your cover crop sown as soon as the straw is cleared from your field, weather permitting obviously.